The first step to organize Tamladu is to contact the shaman, priest, followed by the collection of special wood called asisang kamamasang, the wood of the tree which sparks when it is lit into the fire. The legend behind the tree that ancient Mishmi, while performing pujas, has tasted many species of trees, but found not challenging spiritually. At last, the tree tasted asisang kamamasang. In rites and rituals, the shaman found that this special tree was quite effective and challenging evil spirits spiritually. So it was approved by the Mishmi shaman from the days of Jim Chinese. Since then, the wood has been widely used while conducting Tamlataka and Namsheng Puja respectively. The miscellaneous items required in these pujas are roosters, hen, eggs, turmeric, ginger, sesame seeds, copper, prairie grass, paddy, local rice, and spiritual soil, which is found only in Disu, China and Myanmar border. Tamladu Festival started in the year 1970 in the month of February, Kandilai, from Korliang village, which is near Teju town, Lohit district. The festival continued. The second to fourth festivals were celebrated at Vakro, Swami Camp Hyoliang, Hawaii, respectively. The festival is now celebrated in entire Mishmi inhabited areas every year on 15th February. Tamladu Takatung is a social culture festival of the Kamantara Mishmi. On the onset of spring season in the month of February, the festival is celebrated for promoting and encouraging among the Mishmi to bring under unified banner to preserve their own perpetual age, cultures, traditions, and spread the message of rich cultural dignity, harmony, and identity of the Mishmis. At that very time, worship is offered to the Supreme God, creator of universe and nature, Amik Matai Ringya Jau Malu, as per Kamantara Mishmi mythology and philosophy. Philosophical and spiritual aspect formed Tamladu Festival to provoke and propitiate Amik Matai, Yunya Jaumalu, and the other deities like God of the Mountain, Shuto Dayoya, Goddess of River and Lake, Baruya, and Goddess of Spring Water and Hillock, Timik Kangam, Tatimya, Tamlaya, to bestow their blessings upon all the people, irrespective of all the religion and community, for peace and prosperity.
और यहाँ बैठे सभी देवियों सज्जनों, आप सभी लोग जोरदार तालियों की गड़गड़ाहट से इनका अभिवादन करें, इनका स्वागत करें। ये हमारी मिश्मी समाज की ओर से प्यार भरा उपहार दिया जा रहा है। So may I request the house to give a big hands. और यहाँ बैठे सभी देवियों सज्जनों, आप सभी लोग एक बार जोरदार तालियों से इनका स्वागत करें।
A big round of applause, please, guys. A big round of applause.
The main objective of this puja is to pray collectively to the Almighty for collective welfare and spiritual aspect inhabited in the ecological system within certain area of spiritual jurisdiction.
So now let's proceed to our next program of today's event.
Tamlataka or Namshyang Puja were performed by Mishmis time to time without fixing date and calendar at their respective area and houses. In fact, Tamlataka is performed in newly contrasted house to warm up and to ward off the attack of the evil spirit, epidemics, natural calamities, bad accident and disease upon the livestock as well as the wild insects and the biosphere. Tamlataka is also performed at the beginning of main Mishmi pujas like Tulu, Talo, Changrang.
Jimme, 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 ladi. Jimme, 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 ladi. No my thong shoe ki handsome Domang Bro my thong shoe ki handsome Baya when handsome Ladi Meya when handsome My sa thong shoe ki handsome Yaro when handsome Will you marry me 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 Jimme ladi Anu nai mat kama I promise Apa nai masundu mang I promise Asu nai mat kama I promise Amai nai masundu mang I promise Hey Anu nai mat kama I promise Apa nai masundu mang I promise Asu nai mat kama I promise Amai nai masundu mang I promise Will you marry me 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 Jimme ladi Jimme ladi Nama mukuyayim I promise Naba mukuyayim I promise Napu mukuyayim I promise Nabi mukuyayim I promise Nama mukuyayim I promise Naba mukuyayim I promise Napu mukuyayim I promise Nabi mukuyayim I promise Hey! Will you marry me 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 Popong thong shoe ki handsome Titi thong shoe ki handsome Natya when handsome Nako wena handsome Kimiro tongshu ki handsome Arujang wena handsome Tell her marry me 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 Tell her marry me
In the evening, hosts and elders gather around the shaman and inquire about the good and bad message from the god and goddess. The shaman conveys the spiritual message which he sends during the course of chanting of hymns. At the end, the host or the organizer gives to the shaman some amount of gifts, and the puja concludes and taboo starts. Next day, the taboo is observed strictly to please the god and goddess, to invoke peace, harmony, and prosperity. During the taboo, strangers are not allowed to enter the village, and the villagers are not allowed to go outside the village after Namsiang and Taka Puja. The aims of Tamladu Takatung. Festival is the heart and soul of one's culture. The main objective of the festival is to revive, reform, and preserve the age-old traditional culture heritage and to showcase the rich culture tradition of Kamantara Mishmi. Tamladu Takatung is celebrated on the 15th February in transformed version, which is modern in the character, organized in order to keep peace with a dynamic world in which every section of the society struggle to find their identity and preserve their culture of the Mishmi Hills. The festival is celebrated once in a year to bring one and all the message of joy, happiness, social get-together, and to forget sorrows and misfortunes of the part of life. The taboo or restriction is observed for one day. The puja is one of the most significant traditions to protect the environment and forest, natural disaster, and human errors. The festivals comes as a source of relief to cast off the hangover of daily labor and anxieties of life. It also creates positive thinking in the minds of the common people and trust in the existence of God and Goddess. The common people feels confident that God and Goddess is there to protect the truth of entire mankind and punish the guilty, which in time creates fear psychosis in the minds, so much so that any wrongdoing in the past of the human being would invite divine unseen punishment. This by the good human feeling started to develop in the heart and soul of an individual. Tamladu Takatung is predominantly agriculture, environment-friendly festival, and also a Mishmi New Year for family and friends. Our faith, our guide, our culture, our pride.